From trophies to transfers, match winners to managers, this is the story of the best and worst from every single Premier League club in 2025.
It's Rice again!
Let's kickstart with Arsenal. Yes, we're doing this alphabetically, and no, I'm not putting AFC Bournemouth at the top because it just doesn't feel right. For Arsenal, the undoubted high moment of this year was Declan Rice versus Real Madrid. I mean, two of the greatest free kicks the Champions League has arguably ever seen in the same game as part of a dominant knockout performance. Ridiculous. As well as this, they've bought some exciting players, been brilliant in the league, and are perfectly placed to push for the title in 2026. So it's been a very good year, right? Well, maybe, but maybe not. Because for all the scintillating football, Arsenal are still without a major trophy in recent times, and in May added yet another second place finish to their record. Mikel Arteta has definitely taken Arsenal to new heights, not seen since the prime Wenger days. But sooner or later, the club and its fans need to see this process bear fruit.
Morgan Rogers! Oh, it's a peach!
Next up, Aston Villa. Now, there have been some great performances this year. I think of the PSG comeback in the Champions League, where they narrowly missed out on knocking out the eventual champions. There's also the performances of Morgan Rogers that most weeks are worth the ticket price alone, but actually, the best thing they did was get £64 million for John Duran. They had a real selection headache between him and Ollie Watkins, which Watkins won most of the time. So they effectively got rid of a headache, they got rid of a backup striker, and all for over 4 times worth what they paid for him. That's good business all round. The worst moment for them, though, was definitely the final day robbery at Old Trafford, which saw them miss out on a second successive season of Champions League football. I mean, you work hard all season to get yourselves in a position to share the stage with football's elite, then a poor refereeing decision on the final day takes it all away. That's not ideal. Now on to Bournemouth, and firstly we have Antoine Semenyo, because the guy is just magic on the ball. In fact, I made a video about what makes him so good that you can watch right here, and pretty much everything he touches turns to gold. He was their joint top scorer in all competitions and helped the Cherries to their best ever Premier League finish in 9th, all of which wouldn't have been possible without manager 𝗬𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 as well. They're just a good and exciting team to watch on the South Coast. However, the worst part for them this year was being totally ripped apart in the summer transfer window. You could argue that Iraola has still managed to keep them going after this, but losing 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗥𝗔-𝗬𝗓, Huijsen, not being able to re-sign Kepa, all in the same window is pretty bad. Like, I know teams have to sell eventually, and there was also big money on the table for Dango Ouattara too. But from a business perspective, even though they've done well, football fans want to see their team progress, and losing so many good players is a pain in the arse. And to be honest, with the likelihood of Semenyo being the next out the door, 2026 doesn't look like it's getting off to a good start either.
And Thiago wins it for Brentford.
Now, I've actually swapped Brentford's around because it kind of makes sense, so we'll start with the worst. And that's very similar to Bournemouth, actually, in the way that the Sharks circled and their whole spine was ripped apart in a matter of weeks this summer. First was Thomas Frank, who joined Spurs. Then, captain Christian Norgard went to Arsenal, Bryan Mbeumo joined Manchester United, and just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, Visser joins Newcastle. That's a stunning 39 league goals from last season completely gone. However, the form of Igor Thiago has been, just like the Swiss flag, a massive plus. Missing so much of last season with injury, the Brazilian forward has been more than playing his part in keeping Brentford going in the post-Frank Mbeumo Visser era. And if it wasn't for his goals, new boss Keith Andrews would find himself in a much worse off position. Also, replacing Mark Flecken with a more than capable Kevin Kelleher has also been a good bit of business.
Welbeck! Danny Welbeck!
Now, Brighton are a club constantly improving, no matter who's playing, who leaves, which manager is in charge. So it's no surprise to see Fabian Һ𝗏𝗏 doing well, but even so, for such a young manager to guide the club to an 8th place finish and put in big wins against Liverpool, Spurs, Man City, Chelsea, twice by the way, is just representative of what has been a pretty good year for the club. Quirky fact as well, showing 𝗏𝗏𝗏's high level of decision making and in-game match analysis, Brighton's substitutes have scored more goals than any other team substitutes in the Premier League this season. On an individual level, the form of Danny Welbeck is definitely something to shout about. Maxime de Kuyper looks like a brilliant signing. Jakub Minter's rise is as rapid as he is, and holding on to Carlos Baleba, even if it's not forever, was also a pretty good outcome after a summer of speculation. So, is it all pretty rosy on the South Coast? Well, in context of Brighton, who they are, the size of the club and their resources, yeah, it's looking pretty good. I mean, shipping 7 goals against Nottingham Forest back in February is nothing short of diabolical, but hey, you can't win them all.
Arriving here, and Fleming's arriving.
Now we get to Burnley, with promotion to the Premier League and some brilliant football along the way. There were plenty of clean sheets, and even though the season ended with them losing out on being champions on goal difference, the signing of 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗥𝗔 was exciting. They took 3 points off Sunderland early on, and well, that's about as good as it gets. Look, I know they're a newly promoted side, so I'm hesitant to say the worst thing about their year has been poor form and looking a shoo-in for relegation. But to be honest, aside from the Sunderland game, it has been all doom and gloom, and they are statistically the worst team to watch in the Premier League, with the lowest XG and lowest number of shots in the whole division. And this after losing their best defender in 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 and goalkeeper James Trafford to not only go on to bigger, better things, but to sit on the bench at Manchester City. That's the sort of modern day football lark that won't sit well with those at Turf Moor.
He releases Cole Palmer.
Next up, and Chelsea, because winning the FIFA Club World Cup was a high point for them, despite the mockery the tournament got. Celebrating becoming world champions is something that teams and fans will never get a chance to do, so it's not nothing. And this came just a couple of months after winning the Europa Conference League, where yes, they were heavy favourites, but again, how many teams get to win European trophies? Aside from lifting silverware, the best moment of the year was surely when 𝗬𝗏𝗏 officially joined the club, because in him they have a bona fide superstar in the making who has already produced some outrageously good displays, not least in the 3-0 dismantling of Barcelona in the Champions League. For their worst bit, this is an unusual one, but Chelsea's disciplinary record. Holy moly, that's crap. They've got 6 red cards in all competitions this season, and some of them will fall under the category of silly. Like, I know Maresca's blamed the inconsistency of refereeing, but at some point, you got to look at yourselves. And if you're wondering whether they'll be the least disciplined Premier League team of all time, it's highly unlikely. They have 3 in the league so far, whilst the record is held by Sunderland and QPR, who got 9 in 2009-10 and 11-12 respectively. Crystal Palace are up next. The trips to Wembley. Need I say more? Beating Man City in the FA Cup final, beating Liverpool in the Community Shield, their first foray into European football, 𝗦𝗶𝗃 scoring for fun, watching 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏 pass a ball. These 12 months have literally been one big highlight reel for Palace fans, and I don't blame them for enjoying every single bit of it. I will, however, point out, though, the definite low point of the year, and that is being demoted from the Europa League to the Conference League due to ownership issues and ties to Ligue 1 Lyon, who also qualified for the Europa League. Like I said, after winning the FA Cup and earning that spot, that must have been a hard one to swallow. Having said that, the summer months usually come with a bit of disappointment for Palace anyways, when one of their biggest players is inevitably sold. It was Olise, then Eze left, Gueye will probably leave in the next summer, if not before. Thankfully, there doesn't seem to be much that this club can't overcome.
Dewsbury Hall, and what a finish that is!
Now for Everton. Making it to the new stadium in the Premier League is the best thing they've done. Honestly, there would be something so Everton about surviving relegation year after year, then finally succumbing to it as they say goodbye to 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏, starting life in the new Hill Dickinson Stadium in England's 2nd tier. Thankfully for them, though, they didn't. In fact, they weren't ever really that close. If you had to narrow it down, though, the finest moment of 2025 would have been in the 98th minute of the final Merseyside derby at Goodison Park.
Irabunan, it's chalked up, unbelievable. Look at the scenes at Goodison Park.
Now, as for the worst part, I couldn't really find one. It's all pretty positive. Moisey is back. Dewsbury Hall looks good, as does Grealish. They've started well. I mean, let me know in the comments, Everton fans, what you think. But my one argument is that they are still pretty poor in front of goal. Yes, it's a little too early to judge, but from what I've seen so far, 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏 does not look worth the 27 million paid, and they are still crying out for a top centre forward. Still, they could, and have, had way worse calendar years in recent times than 2025.
It's Wilson! Of course it's Wilson!
Fulham, the sort of neither here nor there team who are equally good and bad in flashes, meaning that the best and worst of this year are made up of multiple smaller things as opposed to one big moment of glory or disaster. I mean, on the plus side, there's been the finally finished new stand at Craven Cottage, which is worth a visit. They also released a kit for the ages with the outrageously cool black and gold 3rd shirt, plus, onto some actual footballing positives, we've seen the emergence of Josh King. The 18-year-old signed a new 4-year deal in the summer, has found his place in the starting 11 ahead of vastly more experienced players, and having played at every England level from under 15 to under 21, is set for a big year ahead. Oh, they also beat West London rivals Brentford too, twice. That's always a good thing. As for the worst part of the last 12 months, I'm picking at a multitude of small pieces here. They lost an FA Cup quarter-final so comfortably to Crystal Palace, it almost felt as if a place at Wembley in the semis wasn't up for grabs. They've also got a comically inconsistent record since January, and if that wasn't enough, the summer transfer window was, let's say, less than inspiring. Up until the last day, their only signing of the summer was a 34-year-old backup goalkeeper in Benjamin Lecomte. A deadline day scramble that saw 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗥𝗓𝗍 and Bayern youngster 𝗕𝗫𝗧𝗥𝗓𝗍 join on loan did little to reverse the perception that the club didn't do their best to push on, and another lower mid-table finish looms. For Leeds United, it's promotion to the Premier League. That was the best moment. Of course it was. Back in the big time, and what a way to do it as champions on 100 points above Burnley on goal difference like I mentioned. They were scoring 6s and 7s, and it was just a good few months for those at Ellen Road. The worst is the fact that, and I'm happy to be wrong here, but that they've entrusted their goal scoring and therefore their chances of survival into the hands of an injury-prone and often inconsistent Dominic Calvert-Lewin. So the best part for Liverpool was their title victory. No prizes for guessing that one correctly. It was the first in front of their fans since 1990, their 20th overall, Slot's first season, a thoroughly deserved title win. On a smaller note for best moments, the scenes when 16-year-old Rio Ungomora scored the last-minute win at St James's Park were incredible. To have been in that away end would have been something else. Aside from the Premier League title though, this year actually just slowly went downhill for Liverpool. Losses to Plymouth in the FA Cup, Newcastle in the League Cup final, blowing a 1-0 lead at home to PSG in the Champions League, not great. They then lost the mysteriously already Spanish-speaking Trent Alexander-Arnold on a free transfer, and to top it all off, they've pretty much imploded since the start of this new season. The crap form is obviously an issue, but at the heart of it, the downfall of Mo Salah and Virgil van Dijk must be painful for the fans to see. These are the two players who have defined Liverpool's success in the past 6 or 7 years. Consistently brilliant, world-class in their own right. So to see such a dramatic drop-off in their performance, plus a public outburst like Salah's, it's a little crazy. Now, obviously, I will point out at this stage that the loss of Diogo Jota and his brother is the worst thing. But that transcends and is way bigger than, to be honest, a silly video that I'm putting together on YouTube. That isn't comparable to anything. It doesn't belong in comparison to transfer windows or poor form. It's bigger than football. It's the worst thing for a family to go through and deserves to be remembered in its correct and individual way. Like I said, not as a small part of some YouTube video that I'm doing.
Holland!
Right then, Manchester City is an odd one to deal with on this list, and I've sort of thought of it as this. What do you give the man who has everything? Because they've won it all recently, didn't win anything in 2025, so therefore does the whole year go in the worst section? I think the 5-1 humiliation at Arsenal most certainly goes in that category. Kevin De Bruyne leaving the club goes there too, as does losing the FA Cup final and being knocked out of the Champions League at the knockout stage. It's kind of the same thing for Haaland and his goal scoring. 22 is great for most strikers in the Premier League, but it didn't win him the Golden Boot and contributed to 0 trophies. So is it then bad? Having said that, to be positive about it all, they did make a huge stride in rebuilding with what I thought was a really good transfer window, especially with the capture of 𝗘𝗫𝗓𝗍𝗓 Reinders. They beat Ipswich 6-0, which sounds like a fun day out, and I guess they are looking more like challenging for a title than they did last season, so that's also a plus. But it's tough to say that any one point this year was the absolute pinnacle.
Bruno Fernandes steps up!
We're starting with the worst again next up for Manchester United because, and I'm trying to not let this happen, but it could get out of hand very quickly. Because amongst the poor form, finishing a record low of 15th in the Premier League, questions over Amarim's future, and the proposal of a stadium that looks like a circus, they lost one of the ugliest games of football in the Europa League final to Spurs. Nobody wanted to be the team that let Spurs finally win a trophy. That's like 90% of the internet's jokes. And United were the ones to do it. I didn't particularly mind, but hey, that's neither here nor there. It was such an uninspiring year that even in the new campaign, when they've threatened to get going again, another poor performance is just around the corner. But, and here is the but, I do actually see a few good points for United in the past year. Firstly, they bought very well. I think Mbeumo and Cunha are two brilliant signings, and they have immediately upgraded the team. Secondly, I actually think sticking with Amarim has allowed the club to plan and develop the side by identifying what they'll need in the coming transfer windows. And lastly, peak moments like victories away at Liverpool and that insane Harry Maguire winner versus Lyon, in fact that whole game, showed that the footballing world is still full of drama and unpredictability, even in the most dire of situations.
They found Bruno Guimaraes!
Now, here's an easy and obvious one with Newcastle United, because this year was finally the year that they broke an unfathomably long streak without a major trophy of 70 years. I can't even wrap my head around the fact that not since 1955 had Newcastle won a major trophy. That's 15 years before club legend 𝗕𝗫𝗍𝗓 was even born, and I don't think Pele's professional career had even started yet. Anyways, it was an almighty weight lifted off their shoulders as the Toon Army saw their side pick up the League Cup at Wembley, and the good times didn't really stop there. They pipped Aston Villa to the last Champions League spot on the final day, eventually sold 𝗬𝗏𝗡 striker 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗍𝗓𝗏 for a ridiculous £125 million plus add-ons, then replaced him with a cheaper, younger player who does a good job at scoring, added some real quality in 𝗦𝗶𝗴𝗍𝗓𝗏, and to top it all off, Dan Burn scored one of the best headers the Champions League has ever seen. On the flip side though, two things stick out for me. The first is their inconsistent form, which has made even at this early stage another run into the Champions League spot seem unlikely. But more than that, I think they wasted £55 million on 𝗕𝗏𝗧𝗏. Now, don't get me wrong, he had a very good few years for Brentford. We know that. But with 1 year remaining on his deal, meaning he'd be on a free next summer, they dropped a huge amount of money on him. Then he got injured on international duty and didn't make his debut until December. If I can praise them for the 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 business, I can definitely criticise them for the 𝗕𝗏𝗧𝗏 business.
Gibbs waits!
So, with Nottingham Forest, honestly, everything up until the summer was pretty good. Great form in the league, finished 7th, European football back at the club, keeper 𝗏𝗏𝗡 shared the golden glove, Chris Wood turned into prime Ronaldo, they beat Brighton 7-0, but that is where the good times ended, because since then, it has been one nightmare after another. They lost a couple of key players. That happens. It's not the end of the world. But they headed into the new season with a clear rift between manager and chairman. Then they got rid of Nuno, replaced him with Ange. He stunk up the gaff for 6 weeks before also being fired. And now, yes, they look a little bit more stable and better equipped to fight relegation, but it's a real fall from grace considering last year's successes. My fear for them is that with a poor season under their belts this time around, some key players like Morgan Gibbs-White might not stick around for too long, despite the fact he signed a new contract in the summer.
To say the least, Xhaka shot, Ederson!
On to Sunderland then, and this is genuinely one of the best. In fact, it's the complete opposite to another club who we'll get onto in a minute, because Sunderland have had one hell of a year. First off, we don't only have promotion, but promotion in the most dramatic of fashions, where a 123rd minute header sent them to the playoff final, which saw a 95th minute winner send them up to the Premier League.
And it falls the way of Watson. Oh! And what a parting gift that is!
They followed this with some inspired transfer business, none more so than the capture of 𝗕𝗓𝗍𝗓𝗏, and then put together their best ever start to a Premier League season, comfortably pushing for a European spot by Christmas time. The worst is, I guess you could say, they lost Joe Bellingham. It's not great, although they did get good money for him. But apart from that, it's been a brilliant 12 months for the Weirsiders. Tottenham Hotspur up next, and they broke the hoodoo. They won a trophy, and a European one to boot. The Europa League final victory will go down as one of Spurs' best ever days, never mind just in this calendar year. Brennan Johnson's unaesthetically pleasing goal and Mickey van der Ven's goal line clearance summed up Spurs last season. Beautifully ugly, with sprinkles of individual genius. That victory also brought Ange Postecoglou's second season manifestation to life in the most glorious way possible, and ensured that somehow Spurs would be playing Champions League football this time around. This then led to the promising signings of Xavi Simons and Mohamed Kudus. But the worst thing for Spurs, though, aside from losing club legend Heung-min Son, also was Ange Postecoglou and his tactical stubbornness that saw Spurs finishing an embarrassing 17th place with a club record 22 losses. In all fairness to him and Thomas Frank this season too, the club faced a ridiculous amount of injuries, but the players left out on the pitch still made for painful watching. Losing 4-1 in the North London derby is definitely a low point, as was losing to Leicester City at home in January, giving them their only points over the course of a 16-game horror run. All in all, just another year in the life of Tottenham Hotspur.
Only as far as Bowen!
I'll be honest now, the last two on this list are absolute stinkers. I'm not throwing any shade, but my word, West Ham have not had much to shout about this year. There was supposed to be some buzz around the hire of Graham Potter, but that fell flat on its face with his subsequent firing. Then they lost Mohamed Kudus to rival Spurs over the summer, and then into the new season, they somehow managed to lose their first 4 home games of the year, all of which were London derbies to Chelsea, Spurs, Palace and Brentford. That is a surefire way to lose fan support. On the flip side, Lucas Paqueta's betting charges were cleared, meaning he avoided a ban. That's good. I think in time, Nuno will be a good choice for manager, But first things first, they need to avoid what would be a very financially damaging relegation.
Through to Strand Larsen!
Finally then, we come to Wolves, where I tried my best to find something good, and my god, it was a tough ask. However, if you cast your mind back to March, April time this year, you'll find something that seems very unlike Wolves: winning football matches. 6 of them, in fact, back to back to back. This run of form completely erased any relegation concerns, and 𝗬𝗓𝗍𝗓 was great fun to watch. But since then, he has left. They're on course to be the worst Premier League team ever, and I just don't know where they go from here. A record low 2 points after the first 14 games is shocking, and I guess the only positive about hitting rock bottom is that the only way is up. Well, after what seems like an almost certain relegation. So that is it for my roundup of every single Premier League team for 2025. Let me know your thoughts on your team's best and worst, and I'll see you in the new year.